So, a very warm welcome. I'm hosting this session on personalisation. And the strapline of this session is revolutionising the way that we make almost everything. And here to tell us their stories and open up a conversation on personalisation, I've got a brilliant panel of Daghan, CEO and co-founder of AI Build. Kirsty, Emery, who is fashion director and co-founder of Unmade, and Joni, Steiner, co-founder of Opendesk. Hope I've got everyone's titles correct. Yeah. So welcome all of you. Just as technology has, of course, and this is now commonplace, disrupted music, film, publishing, just about every industry that we know, it's now revolutionising physical products, how they're made and how they're distributed. And this intersection of technology with the physical made world, of technology with design and craft skills, is something that we at the Crafts Council have been investigating actually for around 10 years, and that's accelerated in the last 4 years. A couple of years ago, we published a report called Innovation Through Craft, that was authored for us by KPMG, and it showed that there was huge potential in this confluence of creative physical intelligence and technology, and that was currently untapped. We're seeing that start to change. We've got 3 companies with us today who are going to tell us how. And crucially, technology is not just transforming what we make, how we make it, where we make it, who makes it, but it's opening up huge opportunities in terms of customization and personalization. Now, if we think about craft, which of course is my job all the time, that notion of the tailored, of the bespoke, of the handmade is what we naturally associate with. It's why we get a lot of products that aren't crafted at all are starting to describe themselves as craft jeans, let's say. But of course, with the Industrial Revolution, everything shifted, and bespoke and tailored became just the provenance of the elite of, they became luxury products. We're now going full circle, and technology is affording mass customization. Or I came across something that Kirsty said about curated customization. I'd like to unpick that a bit with you later on. So there's huge market potential here. Deloitte says that nearly 40% of customers are interested in personalised products and services, and that rises to close to 50% when we look at people aged under 40. And two of the 3 major product categories where this is on the rise are furniture and clothing and apparel, and we've got those industries represented on the panel here today. However, the take-up has been pretty low so far. Only 1 in 6 customers have actually ordered and bought a customised product. So there's a huge gap between the potential of this market and where we are at the moment. So there's definitely economic opportunity in terms of brand definition and differentiation, developing and accessing new markets, building that relationship with the customer, and definitely environmental solutions in terms of reducing waste. I want to pick up that in the conversation a bit later. So this is what we're going to look at. The format of the panel is I'm going to invite each of our speakers to take us through their stories. We won't have questions immediately afterwards, but once we've heard from all 3, then we'll open up a Q&A session. I'm hoping that I'll hear a lot from the audience and we can make it more of a conversation. So first up is Kirsty from Unmade. Over to you, Kirsty.
Thanks. So I'm just going to start off with a quick video, because I think it's the most succinct way of explaining what we do, because it becomes quite complicated quite quickly. I'll tell you a little bit about me and my co-founders, because it's not covered by the video. So Unmade was set up by myself and my 2 co-founders in 2013. My 2 co-founders are Hal Watts and Ben Allen Jones. They both have backgrounds in engineering, both mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, whereas my background is from fashion, specialising within knitwear. And we were working on projects together which were in the fashion space, but also needing to use much more engineering and technical and manufacturing and production know-how. And we were working on projects with UK Sport, looking at how to make Olympian custom one-off clothing. And we very quickly realised that there was huge barriers in the way of being able to do one-off production on this individual level. And so we started looking around at what was available and what were the barriers, and what I could understand the barriers because we were looking at apparel, which is my industry, and I was explaining that actually getting one-off made is really, really difficult. You have all these problems, you've got to go into factories, they only make things in thousands, so on and so forth. Whereas Hal and Ben came from a background where, yes, you need to still get in contact with a manufacturer, but you can create the CAD files quite a lot of the way yourself, or you can design a PCB, so circuit board yourself, or whether it's a CAD file for something to be water cut, laser cut, whatever it is, send it off and you can get something back in a week, which is something which is totally closed off to my industry. So we were starting to look at why is that? What were the things which were getting in the way, particularly when they actually got to see the tools that we actually have available within the fashion industry, and specifically within the knitwear industry, where knitting machines are all over the world. They make exactly the same machines, make everything from knitwear you buy at Primark to a Louis Vuitton, however many thousands of pounds sweater. It's exactly the same machine. It's just the material you're using and the structure, which therefore affects the knit time, and the brand, of course, and what you're paying for in the brand. After that, everything's the same. So we started to look at how we could leverage these machines. Are we feeling
I don't
possible?
know how, tech crew, hello. Can I? How are we doing with the visuals? Are we anywhere near?
Okay, that's fine. So we started this off with a grant from Innovate UK. It was the Technology Strategy Board at the time, to do a feasibility study, which is where we first got to go out, meet the manufacturers, also go and meet not just the manufacturers of knitwear and going into the factories, but also actually the manufacturers of the machines, and to really understand the market and where the barriers were. Was it, what did the brands want? What do the designers want? What is the needs of the manufacturer of the garments? Are they interested in having one-off production? And equally, what is the interests of the machine manufacturers? And the main thing that we learned is that everyone said, well, we'll only do it when somebody else says we can do it. So the designers didn't even consider that it was possible, so they never thought about it. The factories said, well, no one's asked us for it, so we're not going, we're too busy, our margins are too small, we're not going to look into it. And then the machine manufacturers said, well, the factories aren't asking for it, the brands aren't asking for it, so it's not something that we're looking into either. And it was a big kind of like step away. And this was kind of 5 years ago, and there was a lot of pushback at like, who actually wants personalisation? Is that a thing? Is that a trend? Does anyone want this? We don't believe that this is a thing that anyone's actually interested in. So our way of going through this was we realised that very quickly we would need to be our own case study. So we set our business up as a B2B business, where we set up, we reverse engineered how to do all the machine control. We set up our first store and online presence so that we could start to interact with customers, and then we could also build all of the back end. So actually the orders that were placed by customers were going direct to a machine, so the brands that we were talking to could see that actually this was a reality. It wasn't just vaporware and a nice idea by 3 people who thought they were great. So it was being able to actually start to communicate all of that. Off the back of that, we opened a store in Somerset House, which was a pop-up store, which is a great venue, and they're incredibly supportive, and it's where our studios are. I can't say enough wonderful things about how supportive they are. And that gave us our opportunity where we could first really start talking to brands and also to factories and start proof casing step by step what we were doing. Since then, we have built into international e-commerce sites. So we've done things on Farfetch, which I don't know if any of you have heard of Farfetch before, but they are the world's leading luxury online website. And we've integrated with them. We've integrated with factories all over the world. The first factory we integrated with was Johnston's of Elgin, which is based up in the Borders in Scotland, which is over 200 years old and is an incredibly well-respected and known factory world round, which gave us a really good opportunity that then when we were going to other factories, we had an example that we could explain to people. And then we've also been working with global brands as well. So with the Farfetch example, we were working with Opening Ceremony, but since then we've gone on to work with brands such as Ralph Lauren, Rafa, and we've got a big sportswear collaboration coming out, which unfortunately I can't say any more about, but it's very exciting. But that's where we've moved to and towards, and it's all about opening up customization and personalisation to brands so that they can open it up to their consumers, but having to do it in a scalable way, because when you are a multinational brand, you can't just have someone choosing something online and someone just picking something up in a factory. It's not scalable. So it's how we can make it into a scalable option. Are we?
And we look like we might be nearly there. How are we doing? Yeah, okay, perfectly timed.
Cool.
Hold your breath.
Oh,
Yep.
that looks like it's going. Yes, okay.
The fashion industry is in the middle of a huge change. And if we're honest, mass production can't really make what everyone needs anymore. If the fashion industry was starting again today, with the technology that's available, they'd be doing things in a very different way. So Unmade is a fashion technology company, and our objective as a company is to provide the software and the tools that the industry needs to move to an on-demand supply chain model. I think the interesting thing in the fashion industry today is that as consumer demand has evolved, the whole business model of how the industry functions doesn't really work anymore.
Most products are made months in advance, designed for an average, but most people aren't an average. Everyone's unique. This leads to a huge amount of waste where things end up being unsold and go straight to landfill. By changing when you make things, a whole new process emerges. You can involve the customer in what you make. Everything you make has been sold, and you don't have to put things on discount and sale because you don't have unsold stock. We call this curated customization. Customers can change the product to suit their needs, but it's always within parameters defined by the brand.
We manage and track all the steps of the production process from start to finish. When a customer places their order, it goes direct to the factory, automatically creates the manufacturing files before being made, packaged and shipped, and then sent direct to your customer.
We started in knitwear, but now we're applying this process in t-shirts, bags, footwear, and even hard goods. Really, it's something that can be applied to any type of product.
Unmade is the next step in customization.
I'll whiz through my next two because I'm aware that I'm probably well over my assigned time now. But let's see how this is going. Okay, great. So this is kind of the main points just to reiterate of what we do. So it's enabling customization, design. We work a lot with American companies, hence the Z. I still struggle to deal with it, through industrial manufacturing. Curated customization is something that's really important, so I know we'll go into that later, so I'll not dig into that too much now, but it's about still having control as a brand of the aesthetic of what your consumers can do. Seamless integration into e-commerce and existing supply chains, so it's about removing barriers for a brand because it's a big input for them to do. Then unit costs and speed of production, so it's keeping something in line, and so it's a reasonable expectation both for the brand but also for the consumer, because it's a big new step and it can be quite intimidating as a consumer doing your first personalised thing. And then last but not least is that there's no unsold stock. So as everything is made on demand, it reduces overproduction, which is a huge problem in the fashion industry. And it's something which we've spoken to world famous luxury brands who've been very candid with us about their waste rates, and they quite often overproduce by 40%, and that 40%, so that they can protect their brand, they incinerate. So it's complete waste. And if you applied that logic to any other industry, it just wouldn't make any sense. Like if you did it to the automotive industry, that 40% of cars are overproduced and we just incinerate them, makes no sense. So why is this okay in the fashion industry? And then my last slide is just to talk a little bit about transforming the industry and where we see this going. So at the moment we work within personalisation, but we see this in as a stepping stone of moving towards on-demand supply chain, and that's actually the goal that we want to move towards. So it's about reducing overproduction and just having things made to what is actually needed. So I will pass on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very, very eloquent and clear.
Thank you.
Well done. So over to you, Joni, to tell us about Open Space. Sorry, Opendesk, isn't it?
Great, well thanks for inviting me, Annie. And so my background's in architecture. I started Opendesk about 4 years ago with a co-founder. We studied together. We worked as architects, and we one day designed a desk and learned a lot of things about digital fabrication in doing that, and accidentally started a company. So I thought I would start, and some of what I'm going to say I think is going to iterate what sort of has already been said, and I fully sort of back a lot of these positions. But I was thinking, in terms of revolutionising the way we make almost anything, it's good to start and remind ourselves of how we make things now, which is basically a 20th century model of protecting designs in knowledge centres very heavily, copyright control, making things many thousands of miles away in very large volumes, one size fits all, lots of logistics, lots of shipping, big retail markups to cover the warehousing and logistics. It's a wasteful and we think a system that can be really kind of disrupted. We're actually in a world, we believe, and we're excited about a world where supply chains can become a lot more local, social and human-centered. Technology through digital fabrication and design is freeing people to work to both design and produce really wherever they are, and access to these tools is increasing, and that's really exciting. And what does that mean when we look at the scale of a city? So take London, we're actually looking at sort of, thanks. So we're really talking about within a city, being able to produce things within that city for the people in that city. And this is, I could show loads of different maps, and these are just pinpointing the fact that we're working with workshops and craftspeople in cities, and we're actually getting to the point where we're saying we can work without factories and without shipping, and so that is basically what Opendesk is. We're an online furniture company, a new kind of furniture company that operates through a growing library of designs from emerging designers around the world, and a directory of workshops of craftspeople with digital tools in and around different cities in the world. We got excited about digital fabrication as architects, as designers, because it puts you really in touch with the making of things. You get instant feedback, you can prototype things within hours rather than the last building I worked on took about 4 years. And we got excited about actually the most mature and simple digital fabrication technology, which is CNC milling, which is essentially a little bit like large format plotting on sheets of paper. This is cutting out parts from sheets of wood or other sheet materials, and we got excited about it because it's so mature that it's widespread and adopted around the world. We were able to find and uncover workshops in many cities, in many places. It's over 300 now. This is growing all the time. And if I was going to talk about workshops that are local to where we're sitting today, there's probably about 10 in and around London. And these are all independently owned craftspeople who have digital tools. They're carpenters. They make all different products, from kitchens, cupboards, insides of shops, all different things. And so what we're actually doing is building a network that sort of taps into a latent capacity. It's something that's already there. We don't have to actually build any new technology, and we don't have to build any new capacity because it's already here we go. So and if I was going to let's jump ahead. If I was going to go to pick out one other maker around the world, for example, I could pick Enrique in Mexico City, who makes open desks locally for residents in Mexico. And there's another 299 Enriques around the world. So what are we talking about in terms of personalization? All these workshops, in the same way as Kirsty said, products are being made post-purchase, so that means they're being made on demand for a specific person, not for a warehouse. That means they can be customized very simply, for example, in the dimensions of a table, to fit around pesky columns and awkward buildings that we have in London and many places, things to sort of optimize the space usage of workspaces. We're kind of geared mostly towards workplaces at the moment. But we can also talk about more subtle customizations. We can talk about bringing things like logos, modular parts, and integration with third-party elements. Like, for example, here we've got wireless charging elements that are sort of integrated under the desktop. So we can actually add things in based on customer choice. So we take a design that we've already got, and PowerPoint's killed this slide. We start with like one desk, and because it's a digital 3D model, it's a digital file, it doesn't exist in the world as a piece of hardware yet. We can actually think of many versions. We can fork this design into many things. We can add elements as people choose. So the piece that's being made is specific to the workspace, to the needs of that company. And I think this is actually really exciting for designers. It allows the designers to play with hardware in a different way. They can start to be sort of free themselves up, and they don't think like, I've designed this table and it can only be in this configuration. It can actually exist as a set of equations in a 3D model and only get made in the form that it's needed. So you could say it always exists as a prototype. Every single one could technically be different. And here's a little very simple example. Someone, a guy called Josh, really good designer, who submitted a design to us. As a company, we accept designs being sent. We've got inboxes full of crazy projects and pieces of furniture that will never work, from students, architects, interior designers, my dad probably, like loads of people. But some of them are great, and so when we get a really great design that we think people would like and would actually be useful for the world, we might well get back in contact with that designer and say, would you be interested to work with us? We can help kind of re-engineer it slightly to make it makeable through this whole network of local workshops. Next. Right. And of course, the other side of personalization that we're it's gone back, excited about is not just the designs themselves and the kind of aesthetic, the sort of formal side of things, but it's also what are these products made of. We like the idea, and we're very excited about the idea of not only local manufacturing, local production, but local materials. Unfortunately, there's not that many cities in the world that are right in the middle of, forests, and so the idea that we can get the materials we need from next door, that might be okay in sort of Scandinavia, but actually in a lot of cases we can't do that. We're still shipping materials around. But what we're seeing is a whole ecosystem of material producers emerging, startup companies, people who are experimenting with waste streams. So we've got recycled plastics, very contemporary topic, but that's great. I mean, these guys have been doing it for a few years, and these are available in the UK at the moment, these materials, but we are really excited about the idea that soon you'll be able to choose a product, configure it to your needs, but also perhaps we would be able to show you, based on your location, the materials that are available in your area, and you could decide to choose whether that's about a radius of like how many miles away, or maybe you would actually change that for the carbon footprint, so something further away actually comes back into play because it's actually shipped by boat, or it's an electric truck, or whatever it is. So this layering of information and data on top of products, I think it's going to start to allow people to make smart choices, like they do in fashion, like they do in food, and in furniture. And so what's been great for us as a startup company is that a lot of people have kind of backed this idea. They've got excited about having their furniture in their workplace made in this way, in a distributed way, through many small things rather than one big factory. We've worked with startups through to kind of very big companies, and they've all got very different workplaces, very different needs, in very different locations and very different types of buildings. But the common sort of factor is that all their products for these workplaces were made specifically for that workplace in the city in which they're needed.
Johnny, I know we started
Yeah.
a bit late, but yeah.
So the final slide is just to say that for us, we're excited about personalisation being something to do with things that are made locally, and the personalisation is kind of inherent in the fact that it's being made for you, and that kind of has many benefits for designers, for makers, but also through materials for the environment and for our cities, local economies.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So now over to Daghan. By contrast, you are working with the very cutting edge of technology in the customisation space. So let's hear about AI build.
Okay, well, thank you very much firstly for inviting. I really enjoyed the first two talks, and it's true now. I will try to be very careful in what I say, because we are attacking the same problem from a different angle. So we are building the factories of the future, and Opendesk said no factories, so I think it will be an interesting debate. Okay, firstly, before I explain you about the factories of the future, let me tell you about what is the problem with the current situation of the factories. So we are basically attacking three problems that we see today happening in manufacturing. One thing is the intense amount of human labor required for making parts. So this creates a lot of inefficiencies in the parts that we are building, and we think the human labor or the intelligence of humans should be used in more creative tasks rather than just replacing machines. So that's the first fundamental problem that we are taking. The other one is manufacturing in general is responsible for the most amount of pollution and waste that the world is creating. So we need to resolve this. We need to find a better way to manufacture things without so much waste. And lastly is also about the topic of this conversation. A lot of the production that's happening today is coming from the ideas of Henry Ford, and the parts need to be standardized. So we need to make thousands or millions of them for them to be feasible. So there's very little space for customization. So that's another problem we need to solve. And the solution is 3D printing. But so the nice thing about 3D printing is, so it's a bit like magic. You have a 3D file and the machine makes it. And with almost any complexity, the machine can make parts. And okay, well, if 3D printing is so great, why it's not taking over manufacturing already, right? It has a tiny percentage in the overall manufacturing market. And the reason for that is it's very expensive, too expensive. And that's the problem that our company is working on. We are making 3D printing, especially large-scale 3D printing, affordable, so that it can be used in new markets like furniture and construction. So this is our product. We have a 3D printer which is attached to an industrial robotic arm and a web application that connects to the factory and controls the robots. And basically what our technology does is simulate the manufacturing process beforehand, so that we can predict the material behavior and pick the best parameters, like best manufacturing settings, before we even started manufacturing. This is important because when we analyze what makes 3D printing so expensive, very funnily we found out that it's actually human labor. It's not the machines, it's not the materials. There's a lot of human labor involved in 3D printing. And the reason for that is you take a design file and then you prepare it, and then you have to do several tests, a lot of prototyping until you get the perfect quality. And that's what basically our product automates. So we go from design to production immediately through our platform. And yeah, I won't go too much into technical details, but yeah, also to mention, this is the great team behind the product. My co-founder and myself, also architects, like Opendesk architects, like to think outside the box. And I see now a lot of colleagues doing very different things than architecture. And then, yeah, the great team. And we also have very strong partners and investors backing our company. And I will just flip through some of the, I mean, this is a bit similar to actually the story of Unmade. Like when we talked to the factories, look, this is the future of making things. They said, okay, great, but show me an example. So we had to go and build our own factory in East London and do pilot projects before we integrate our technology in the factories. So those are some of the examples we built in the last 2 years. So this one, for example, is an architectural piece for NVIDIA. It's a 5 meter by 5 meter, like a huge architectural installation built only in 2 weeks with one robot. And it basically shows the capability of the technology. Another one we did for Zaha Hadid Architects, this very intricate form, again 3D printed with robots. This is a young designer's surfboard. So he worked with the idea of reinforcing the structure with structural optimization. And this is a digital catapult, a sculpture, this is a chair. So we did many of these prototypes, tests, just to improve our technology. These are molds that are being used in construction. Again, the idea is to make custom forms in an efficient way. And so this project is quite interesting. It's now open at Regent Street. We 3D printed the entire store. The wall panels and the ceiling panels are 3D printed in our factory, and they're assembled on site. And now it's open, actually. I don't have pictures, but this is more or less what it looks like. And this is 2 weeks ago. We were in Venice, another collaboration with Arup Engineers. It's part of the Venice Biennale. Was taking this very intricate form and materializing it. And so the interesting discussion we had for this project was, okay, if we are able to produce anything and everything, what would be how should the designers think? Because traditionally we have the constraints in mind, like we know that we have standard parts, and also in architecture, but also in product design. We are very constrained from the beginning to think like with certain parameters. But now 3D printing and robotics and automation is making almost anything possible. So the designers now started thinking in terms of efficiency and lightweightness and using data to make better products. And fabrication becomes less and less of a constraint. And the last example is this furniture company that is our first client, actually, setting up their factory in London. And they will be producing these furniture pieces for the mass market. So it's going to be 3D printing for the mass market for the first time and sold at very affordable prices. Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so we've got about 10-12 minutes to open up to questions, because I'm keen that everyone gets to their next session on time. Before I start the Q&A, I'm curious about who's here in the audience, because we're here at a conference where creativity is meeting technology. Personally, I don't think in those binaries, but some people might. So who would describe themselves as from a tech company or tech background? On that spectrum, okay. And he's from a creative background, okay. And I've already seen someone, he's from both. And something else altogether, any waves? Okay, I'm curious about what that is. You might be. Banking, right, great. So a key part of this equation. And maybe we'll start with that and about financing, because both Kirsty and Daghan talked about the proof of concept and needing to make your case. I know Opendesk and Unmade both got some funding through Innovate. So tell me about how, if you were advising a startup now in this space, what advice would you give them? Who wants to pick that up?
I would advise trying to do something is the first step, which is really difficult and is actually a really hard thing to do. But actually, anyone can talk about a really great idea, and you can ruminate on a great idea all day long and tell everyone all about it. But actually, when you try and build your first thing, whether it's software or if it's a physical thing, you're going to find out so much information and so many assumptions that you made that actually don't follow through as you plan them to. So only by building your first one, you have a conversation point to actually talk to people about, and you can show people, for if you are looking for investment, that you've got a conversation point, but also is you can start challenging your assumptions and starting to improve your product.
Right. Okay. So show, don't tell. Try
Yes.
it out. Make your mistakes. Find out. Iterate.
Exactly.
Anyone else? Joni, you want to add?
I think in our case, we, as I said, we sort of accidentally started the company because we had designed a desk, and then we got people asking for this desk, but we didn't have any. We couldn't fund the development of the company off the back of selling a few desks. So we got this Innovate UK grant at about the third time of trying, and then we had to match fund that. And we couldn't do it ourselves, so we did a crowd. We crowd raised some money through with a crowd cube. So that means we have lots of very small investors, something like 249 from £10 upwards. But that was great because we'd already been telling the world about what we were trying to do at that point, and so we had this community of people that were really interested in this idea of distributed manufacturing, and we were actually able to get that within 24 hours. Because I think people got excited about the story. So building the community around what we were trying to do, I think for us was really important.
Right. Okay. And Daghan, your investment story, you had an array of investors on that slide.
I think I totally agree with the comments, like ideas are worth nothing until you execute them. And what we learned is what matters the most for a startup to get investment is traction. So if you show a customer paying for your technology, and then show a list of other customers that want to pay for your technology, but you don't have the capacity to grow, that's the best case you can make to an investor. I think that's what the only way to achieve that, like to get customers, is to make them happy, right? You need to give them what they want. So you need to actively engage with them, understand their needs, and make a product that actually works.
Okay. So any requests of, I don't want to put you on the spot as the representative of the banking industry, but any requests if you were talking to financiers here, are they listening to your kind of startup, your kind of company? Not so much startup now, scale up, but...
Wow. So we have quite a bit of VC funding behind us now. We've been through a couple of rounds of funding. I think that something that we have found is finding someone is, we now have a great team of investments, and it's a totally different situation of it's, as a startup, is learning how to speak to finance people. We were lucky enough to go through Techstars, which gave us a lot of advice and help doing that, but there is always learning the language and learning what you're asking for and what are the rules and the guidelines and the parameters, because most people who start up a startup, they're a knitwear designer or architects, mainly architects apparently, so or engineers, but it's not where you set off in your life. It's not necessarily where your training is, and I think that also applies to a lot of other industries as well. Of when you're, when we started the company, there was 3 of us who were in our mid-20s. We'd managed projects and stuff, but we hadn't done HR, we hadn't learned about, marketing or sales or how to do legal contracts. There's so many things that you're learning all the time, so the more information that people can give you and help is always very much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the floor? Yes.
Hello, my name is Elena. It was really interesting and nice to hear your thoughts. I have this question. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing in your company in terms of customer support? Because I assume that you have received a lot of questions, or is it like that? And I liked a lot of the idea about the curated customization, because I love customization, but where does it end? Like sometimes customers want a lot of things and you cannot produce or offer them what they want. So do you have some stories to share in terms of curated?
So I'll split it into 2. So curated customization, we've created what we call curated customization for two reasons. One is that when we very first started the company, we created, it was a bit like paint for knitting, and we had loads of really amazing, really creative people come around, and most of them drew a stickman or a cat on it. So we realised that if that's what really creative, amazing people drew, that maybe that was not what we wanted to open up to the general public. So we felt that that would then make what we were offering as a very like, it would just become a marketing thing. It would be a fad, it would come and it would go.
Right.
And the long-term benefits of what we could see and the real revolutionary changes that we could make in the industry would be missed. So that was the first step of curator customization. The second thing is that we work with brands. So a brand wants to protect their brand. That is their number one thing that they want to do, and that is their aesthetic, but there's also always legal implications as well, that they want to make sure that you don't have your, your Adidas sweater with a Nike tick on it. No one's going to be happy about that. So it's so that you can make sure that when a brand produces something, it's still clearly that brand. If you're going and buying a branded item, and particularly the brands we work for, it's quite a high price point still, so you're looking at like $200-esque sweaters, you're spending that money so that you're buying that brand for their quality, who they are, and so other people know that you're wearing your Ralph Lauren sweater or whoever it is. So you need it to still be able to tell people that you're part of that club, essentially. So it's enabling a customer to still be part of the tribe or club or whatever you want to call it, and it's also enabling a brand to protect their aesthetic and their brand. So I think that's kind of around curator customization. The other thing that I know that you asked, which I hope that the other guys will be able to help a bit more with as well, is about customer service. So I'll let you guys...
Well, we've started to look into offering people customization in browser. So if you want to resize a piece of furniture, but obviously there's constraints with furniture. It's like, I guess with a piece of knitwear, you're not going to injure somebody necessarily. Whereas with
hopefully not.
somebody, if we've got some people who've built some interesting plugins. You can sort of change the number of legs on a table, right? But you obviously need constraints to stop people putting 2 legs on a table. So you can start to model the constraints, and you can actually model and constrain things like balance and strength, structural integrity, all these kind of things, even within our quite simple 2D cutting. So imagine in 3D printing that you can kind of go into much more complex modeling, but we haven't enabled that yet in terms of the customer interface in our side, because the challenge we're trying to bite off is like, how do we make a table in 300 locations to exactly the same quality specification in every city. And right now we could make each one a different shape and a different color and everything else, but we need to kind of go step by step. So there's still quite a lot of the customer experience is still developing as well. So we've got people that can essentially check out through our website. They get to see who's going to make their furniture. But there's loads of questions, so that is it's quite hard to manage that in a really smart, fluid way. So we're like working on that, but I wouldn't say it's that easy. There's a lot of questions.
I think so. Yeah, like we have a similar case. Like we are basically trying to integrate everything in the product, like the automation of design and the customer never wants to deal with customer support. The best customer support is no customer support. But to get there, of course, we need to go through several steps, and it's quite challenging. But yeah, like the whole idea about like customization is that people have the autonomy to make their decisions, and they don't need the product maker or the manufacturer to tell them what they have to do. Only if they have a problem, they call the factory and they say the machine is not working. And yeah, ideally we don't have that.
But you do see, I think, if you can watch like, you can basically record people's use of your website. It anonymizes it, but basically you can see that if you give people too much choice, there's like a paralysis of choice. It's like the paradox of choice. If you've got too many choices, you just choose the thing that you're onto.
Yeah.
I think that for us, that we're not sure where to set that yet. That's why we haven't released it yet.
And it's
Yeah.
part of the value that you're offering, right?
Mm.
Because just as an editor in music or in film will be pointing you towards, or a
Yeah.
critic will be pointing you towards the good stuff, in a way you're offering the value of design expertise that set
Yeah.
the parameters and offers value to the customer.
Yeah.
Another question, yes, and then we'll come to you, and then we might have to wrap. So yes.
Firstly, I just want to say to Kirsty, I have one of your scarves.
Oh, good.
It's delightful, and you also haven't pointed out that the customer gets their name in the label.
Unfortunately, we could do that when we were doing B2C,
Oh.
but we don't do that, and we can't do it with the big brands that we're working with at the moment. So it's coming back.
You've got special
Thank
ones.
you.
Like
Yeah.
at school, you get your name saying.
Yeah.
Now, a question to Daghan. I'm really relieved to see a 3D printing project today. The whole day has been silent about this technology. It
Right.
appears to be yesterday's technology. Everyone's talking about AI and VR and all of that. No one's talking about 3D printing. And being involved in it myself, I'm relieved that there's still something to talk about. I don't quite understand where your project involves personalisation. All of these seem to be quite specific designs. Where is there a customised or personalised element to any of those objects that you showed us?
So we are actually a technology company, and we provide the platform to other factories to do their customization. So the projects that I have shown today are pilot projects that we built to showcase the product. But the customization, like for example in the case of the furniture company, they are looking into building this web platform for their own customers to like select the size of the chair and the color and the material and everything. So they will be adding the customization layer, but we provide them the infrastructure.
And that's done online, is it? They're using some platform?
The software is online,
Right.
so you can connect to your factory through a laptop or mobile. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And question here.
Well, customisation and premiumisation stays premium. I kind of can completely understand, I guess, when it goes mainstream, the expectation of service, returns, distance selling regs, all that kind of stuff kicks in. And previously working in fashion and homeware, when you get the sofa and you lock in even the choice of wood and the choice of fabric, the returns, obviously you lose half your money. It's really challenging. How do you guys had any thoughts on that? Is it too early? Let's just get some sales and I'll worry about that a bit later. But I'd just be intrigued as we start to get into a more personalised world, how the returns, which is such a growth driver, is going to be.
Well, I
You
think
can go first.
yeah, it's a very good question. We've looked into other furniture companies, and you will find that the warranties, the guarantees, and the things like return policies are very, very different if you've made even a very small change to a sort of standard item. So for us, we have like the sort of statutory return period and things like that, but we do actually try and sort of communicate the story, which is this thing's going to be made for you by this person in your city. If you went and found a carpenter somewhere and asked them to make something for you, and then they made it and you didn't like it, if you had a valid reason for why you didn't like it, maybe you could, return it. But the chances are there's probably a kind of there's a contract there between the customer and the, it's a contractual position. But we need to be we're being super upfront and open about it. But yeah, I think if you the more specific you make something, especially if it's tailored to your body, obviously, it's going to be harder to make the argument that you don't want it.
Yeah.
Probably a bit easier for us.
Yeah, within the fashion industry, making a custom item at this level, that legally you do not have to accept returns, which I'm sure you're aware of. But that is something that we leave to the brand, and it's a customer service choice for them, because we actually sell software. We're not selling direct to the customer anymore. So it's something that we leave it to them as a choice. So far with the brands we've worked with, we've found that generally their position is that no, they don't do returns, but their customer service, particularly at the beginning where they're finding their way, they may accept some. And also it's a very different, it's very unusual for customer service, and it's finding ways to give that information as early as possible to the customer so that they understand that this is something that is being made especially for them. And it's something which we're constantly talking about and communicating. And yeah, it's just kind of about making those decisions as a brand?
It's a great question. I was speaking yesterday to the founder of a firm called Anu, which is based in Morocco, and it connects Moroccan artisans in the Atlas Mountains with customers worldwide, and the artisans can sell direct to the customer, and the customer can co-design, and it's all created through a language-free platform on the Moroccan side to enable artisans who might not have language skills in any language to be able to co-design, produce, own the profits from the work. I hear that in most cases they only get 6% of the value of the good, which is even lower than I thought. So this is a great platform, but the founder was telling me that they're starting to get quality assurance issues and trying to resolve that through a co-owned process. So of course when things are distributed, it's a huge problem, and it's a great question. Was there anything you wanted to add on this, Daghan, before we wrap up?
I think it was a great discussion, and it was really inspiring to see similar stories, another architect and another designer taking on the similar problems. Thank you very much.
So the beauty of combining different mindsets to create value, which is what the conference is all about. Thank you all for joining us for this panel, and thank you to Joni, Kirsty and Daghan. Thanks.